As of 2021, nearly half of humanity lives in cities. We're urban animals now. And yet, even with all our advancements in engineering and architecture, we still haven't figured out how to make cities that can last forever. Most of the cities we know today won't exist in 100 years or so. Either they'll be completely underwater or uninhabitable due to extreme weather. So what if cities did sink? In this video, we'll explore what would happen to people and wildlife when cities disappear underwater. Manhattan Island is home to 8.4 million people. It's the most densely populated place in all of North America. But in about 100 years, it could also become the most underwater place in all of North America. According to the latest report from the National Climate Assessment, which was released by the U.S. Global Change Research Program, sea levels along the Atlantic coast are projected to rise between 7 and 13 inches by the year 2100. For Manhattan, that means up to 60% of the island will be flooded every high tide. Entire subway lines will be submerged, parks and golf courses will turn into lakes, and Central Park could become an inland sea. When planning for this outcome, New York officials have opted not to build seawalls to keep the ocean out, reasoning that such a project would cost over $100 billion and wouldn't even slow down the inevitable. Instead, the city is investing in pumping stations and flood barriers that could be installed on bridges and tunnels to keep the waters out during storms. Those measures should buy the city some time, but eventually the whole place will be underwater. So let's imagine that Manhattan is entirely underwater. What happens next? You might think that the first order of business for the 8 million former New Yorkers would be to find a new place to live. But because of how quickly rising sea levels will submerge the city, residents will probably only have a few hours to get out. This is assuming they even realize what's happening in time. The thing is, sea levels don't just rise slowly. They can spike dramatically after storms or earthquakes. If a storm surge happens while people are sleeping, entire communities could be trapped by the rising water and forced to evacuate on foot, carrying only what they can. Many elderly people and children would likely die in the stampede. Some would try to outrun the rising water in cars, but they'd soon find that the streets are flooding too fast to escape. In fact, many of those who do make it out of the city will find themselves stranded in traffic for days. With emergency services overwhelmed, people in their cars will eventually have to abandon their vehicles and flee on foot. Now, anyone who makes it out of the city alive will probably want to head inland, but they shouldn't. Even though the land farther away from the coast might seem like an oasis, it'll be full of debris carried by the current. Debris will include everything from houses and cars to dead bodies and sewage. There will also be dangerous chemicals from factories and power plants along the coast that nobody had time to shut down. As the water recedes, it'll leave behind a toxic wasteland that's uninhabitable for humans and most living things. Areas farther inland will be inundated with salt water, turning rivers and lakes into virtual oceans. Only mountainous regions will remain dry, and they'll be swarmed by people fleeing the coastal cities. In short, it'll be every man for himself. There will be no rescue operations because the places that could send help will also be underwater. People who are far enough inland to survive will probably huddle together on hillsides, watching the cities they once lived in disappear beneath the waves. To get an idea of what this will look like, consider what happened in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. In the aftermath of the storm, some 10,000 people were stuck on rooftops waiting for help that never came. They were forced to stay there for days, drinking salty water and eating whatever they could find. Hundreds of people died. Now, imagine a much larger scale version of this event where the city doesn't just get destroyed by a storm, but by rising sea levels. But what about the wildlife? Humans aren't the only animals that will need to flee their homes. Mammals like polar bears and Siberian tigers, birds like terns and puffins, reptiles like sea turtles and crocodiles, amphibians like salamanders and frogs, and fish will need to move inland too. Animals that can't move quickly enough will die. Fish that swim toward the surface will be met with a wall of solid waste and plastic that has accumulated in the upper layers of the ocean. Those who dive deep will be crushed by the weight of thousands of tons of water. Many fish will try to hide from the disaster in the darkest depths of the ocean, only to find that the bottom of the ocean floor is littered with sunken ships, buildings, and discarded objects. Of course, some species will adapt, like the peregrine falcon, which has already learned to hunt ducks and pigeons in urban environments. Amphibians will likely fare very poorly. While most amphibians can live both on land and in water, they need moist environments to survive. Once the water around them becomes salty, they'll die. The only creatures that will thrive in this new world will be bacteria. They'll devour the corpses left behind and recycle nutrients back into the ecosystem. After a few decades, giant patches of kelp may appear in the shallows. Kelp forests will serve as a habitat for new species of fish and other organisms. Because light can't penetrate far into the depths, though, the sunlit zone of the ocean will be a haven of life while the rest of the ocean becomes a graveyard of the past. Eventually, though, even the kelp will die off as the water becomes too salty for them to survive. At that point, the ocean will resemble the Dead Sea, which is why scientists sometimes call the ocean the C word. The process of a city sinking is often slow, but it can also happen in an instant. On July 1980, for example, a volcanic eruption caused a section of Colombia's El Caldante volcano to collapse. This triggered a massive landslide that raced into Lake Guatavita at 20 miles per hour, generating a 200-foot tsunami that obliterated the nearby town of Arbolé. Homes were swept away, and more than 20,000 people lost their lives. A similar tragedy struck the ancient Greek city of Helike in the 2nd century BC when the shoreline abruptly collapsed, plunging much of the city into the sea. Historical accounts say that 2/3 of the city was destroyed and many citizens drowned. Rising sea levels aren't the only way cities could sink. However, coastal areas are also vulnerable to tsunamis and hurricanes, which can easily swallow entire communities in a matter of minutes. On December 26, 2004, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, generated a tsunami that crashed into 14 countries, killing over 230,000 people. Cities along the coast were reduced to rubble and entire villages disappeared beneath the waves. Similarly, in 2017, Hurricane Maria slammed into the island of Dominica, destroying 90% of the buildings on the island and leaving its 72,000 residents homeless. Floods aren't always caused by natural disasters either. In August 1970, the Oxford and Cambridge University colleges were flooded after heavy rain fell overnight. Locals had to use rowboats to navigate the streets, and firefighters had to be rescued from their flooded stations. In October 2011, parts of Britain were underwater after torrential rain caused rivers to overflow. More than 100 homes were destroyed and thousands of people had to be evacuated. Floods can also happen inside of homes. In 2017, Houston, Texas experienced record-breaking rainfall. In just 6 days, 48 inches of rain fell on the city, causing widespread flooding. Thousands of homes were destroyed and hundreds of people had to be rescued from their attics. You've probably noticed a pattern here. The one thing all these disasters have in common is that they're totally unavoidable. We can't stop volcanoes from erupting, earthquakes from striking, or hurricanes from forming. All we can do is prepare for the worst and hope for the best. In the case of rising sea levels, though, we do have a choice to make. We can either take drastic action now to slow down global warming or watch helplessly as our cities get swallowed by the ocean. That's all. Subscribe to the channel, like, and follow us. Thank you.